हेलो एवरीवन, वेलकम टू माय यूट्यूब चैनल द सोलफुल डायरी। आज की वीडियो में हम बात करेंगे कमला दास और उनकी पोम माय ग्रैंडमदर्स हाउस के बारे में। चलिए पहले पोम को डिस्कस करने से पहले पोएट के बारे में डिस्कस कर लेते हैं। चलिए पहले पोएट के बारे में डिस्कस कर लेते हैं। कमला दास was born on 31st March 1934 in Malabar, Kerala. Das is one of the best known contemporary Indian women writers. Writing in two languages, English and Malayalam, Das has authored many autobiographical works and novels. Her upbringing in a conservative family deeply influenced her writing as she grappled with the constraints of literature and patriarchy. Kamala Das' poetry collection included Summer in Calcutta 1965, The Descendants 1967, The Old Playhouse and Other Poems 1973, Alphabet of Lust 1976, A Doll for the Child Prostitute 1977, and Padmavati the Harlot 1992. Notable among her many Malayalam works were the short story collection Thanupu 1967, Gold, and the memoir of Balyakal Samarkal, Memories of Childhood 1987. Perhaps her best known work was an autobiography which first appeared as a series of columns in the weekly Malayanadu, then in Malayalam as Enti Katha 1973, and finally in English as My Story. Das was noted for her many Malayalam short stories as well as many poems written in English. She was also a syndicated columnist. She once claimed that poetry does not sell in this country, India, but her forthright columns, which sounded off on everything from women's issues and the child care to politics, were popular. Das first book of poetry, Summer in Calcutta, was released with fresh air in Indian English poetry. Her works are known for their originality, versatility, and the indigenous flavor of the soil. She had also held positions as vice chairperson in Kerala Sahitya Academy and Kerala Forestry Board, president of the Children's Film Society. Das wrote more than 20 books. Her topics range from religion to politics to the beauty secrets of Nair women. Several well received collections of poetry in English, numerous volumes of short stories, and essays on a broad spectrum of subjects. Since the publication of her first collection of poetry, Summer in Calcutta 1965, Tas has been considered an important voice of her generation, exemplified by a break from the past by writing in a distinctly Indian persona rather than adopting the techniques of the English modernists. The spontaneity are often translated into whimsically and earned the ire of critics, but it allowed her to explore the paradoxes of life and relationship with emotional honesty. Kamla Das was born in a conservative Hindu Nair family and had a royal ancestry. On 11 December 1999, at the age of 65, Das converted to Islam. She is also Kamla Suraya, the name she took after converting to Islam in 1999. She was also named Madhu Vikutti, the pseudonym she gave herself when writing in Malayalam. Finally, she is also Ami, a pet name she reserved for herself in her memoirs. Kamla is a poet of protest also. She rebels against the conventions, traditions, and accepted norms of society. Her protest is directed against injustice and exploitation. She made her poetry a vehicle for the expression of her resentment against male domination over women. She is a confessional poet. Kamala Das is a confessional poet. In this context, she can be compared with the Ramanujan, Ezekiel, R. Lowell, Anne Sexton, Sylvia Plath, and J. Wright. As a true confessional poet, she takes her readers into confidence about her private life. She knows with remarkable frankness the wrongs, injustice, and the humiliation that she has suffered in a male dominant world. She has candidly described her traumatic experiences of lovemaking and of sexual. A command of the English language is naturally the first requirement of an Indo-Anglican poet. Kamala Das' command over English language deserves to be admired. This command has duly been recognized by most of the scholars. She has a vast range of vocabulary. She understands the precise meaning of words. She can differentiate between the shades of meanings. We may take any poem by Kamala Das and we shall find evidence of her command on the English language. Kamala Das deserves high praise for her choice of words and for combining those words into phrases, clauses, and sentences. In the choice of words, she exercises a special care. Her words are neither splendid nor glittering. According to the requirements of the poem, Kamala Das is able to use simple and tough words. She is a poet in the confessional mode, and thus her tone is conversational and her diction is often colloquial. The words come to her effortlessly and become one with emotion. Kamala Suraya, formerly known as Kamala Das, was a major Indian English poet and literature, and at the same time a leading Malayalam author from Kerala, India. Her popularity in Kerala is based chiefly on her short stories and autobiography, while her oeuvre in English, written under the name Kamala Das, is noted for the fairy poems and explicit autobiography. Her open and honest treatment of female sexuality, free from any sense of guilt, infused her writing with power, but also marked her as an iconoclast in her generation. The critics generally admire as for her frank treatment of love and sex, bold presentation in the confession statement. पोम को इन डेप्थ डिस्कस करने से पहले जान लेते हैं उसके कुछ की फीचर्स. माई ग्रैंड मदर्स हाउस mourns the lost love and warmth of her ancestral home, contrasting it with her loveless present. Poem first appeared in Kamala Das' first anthology of verse titled Summertime in Calcutta 1965. It is also an autobiographical poem in which the poet's longing for her parental house in Malabar is movingly described. She is reminded of her ancestral house where she had received immense love and affection from her grandmother. The poet's feminine sensibility finds its cleverest loveless relationships in it. A note of pessimism runs throughout the action of the poem. It reveals the poet's painful, unfulfilled desire to visit her grandmother's house to which she is deeply and emotionally attached. The poet is shocked to learn that the house is all in ruin after the death of her grandmother. She suffers in silence due to the wear and tear it has undergone in her absence. A death like silence reigns in her grandmother's house. Moreover, the intensity of her grief is suggestively conveyed by the ellipses in the form of a few dots in this section of the poem. Was her disenchantment with her loveless marriage that reminded her of her grandmother's pure and selfless love. Her art is itself like a dark window where the fresh air does not blow. The image of the house has stuck all to her mind. The poet has also used the similes of a brooding dog to show her inability to pay a visit to her grandmother's house. She has also used suggestive visual imagery of blind eyes of the windows and the frozen air to convey the idea of death and desperation. चलिए आप पोम को इन डेप्थ डिस्कस करते हैं. लाइन्स 1 to 5. There is a house now far away from where once I received love. That woman died. The house withdrew into silence. Snakes moved among books. I was then too young to read, and my blood turned cold like the moon. The poem, My Grandmother's House, shows Kamlada's intense love and attachment to it. She suffers from an acute sense of alienation after having left this place after her marriage. The poet now lives in big city after her marriage, a remote place from her grandmother's house. She is reminded of her grandmother's house where she spent her memorable childhood. Ironically, it is the only place where she received love from her grandmother. The death of the grandmother is even mourned by the house to which she was emotionally attached. A death-like silence reigned in the house after her exit from this world. It seems that the grandmother was the very soul of this house. Being deserted, the snakes could be seen among books in the library of the house. At that point in time, she was too young to read those books, which looked quite horrible and repulsive like snakes. She was also almost frozen with fear at the passing away of her grandmother and seemed cold like the moon. The very opening lines of the poem capture alive the poet's mood of nostalgia. She is reminded of the happiest days of her childhood which she spent in the company of her grandmother. She was deeply attached to her grandmother, who was very caring and affectionate to her. She was emotionally destabilized after the death of her grandmother and felt almost heartbroken. The intensity of her grief is suggestively conveyed by the ellipse in the form of a few dots in this section of the poem. It was her disenchantment with her loveless marriage that reminded her of her grandmother's pure and selfless love. Lines 6 to 12. How often I think of going there to peer through the blind eyes of windows or just listen to the frozen air, or in wild despair pick an armful of darkness to bring it here to lie behind my bedroom door like a brooding dog. In the above lines of the poem, the poet defines her relationship with her grandmother in a very moving manner. Kamala Das is reminded of the happiest days of her childhood, which spent with her grandmother. The poet was deeply attached to her grandmother, who was very caring and affectionate to her. She was emotionally shattered after the death of her grandmother, who had been the chief source of inspiration in her life. The poet often longs to visit her grandmother's house, to which she was emotionally attached since her childhood. It has been a place of security and protection, which is sadly missing in her new house in the city. She would like to peep through the dust ridden or colored panes of windows that were shut after the death of the grandmother. She would like to listen and feel the still atmosphere prevailing in the house. It is this longing to revisit her grandmother's house that adds to her sense of frustration and hopelessness. The darkness of her grandmother's house can have no terrifying impact on her. She would like to gather some darkness, some memories of the grandmother's house and bring them to her present city residence. The very memories of her grandmother's house will have a soothing impact on her loveless and hopeless married life. The poet is in a mood of reminiscence and recreates the plight of the grandmother's house after her departure from the scene of life. She gives us the very feel of the house in its state of neglect and desertion. The poet has used the simile of a brooding dog to show her inability to pay a visit to her grandmother's house. She has employed suggestive visual imagery of blind eyes of the windows and the frozen air to convey the idea of death and desperation. Lines 12 to 16. You cannot believe, darling, can you, that I lived in such a house and was proud and loved. I who have lost my way and beg now at strangers' doors to receive love, at least in small change. In these lines, the poet shows her frustration and disenchantment in the marital life forced her to go into for an extramarital relationship. The poet often longs to visit her grandmother's house, to which she was emotionally attached since her childhood. Unlike her miserable city life with her husband, it had been a place of security and genuine love for her. Here, the poet informs her dear husband that he can never believe the intensity of love that she received from her grandmother. He can never realize that she was extremely proud of her grandmother's house, where she was deeply loved by her grandmother. It is her separation from her grandmother's house after marriage that has ruined her life forever. It is loveless and hopeless married life that has crippled her sense of pride and love, which she used to have in her grandmother's house. She has become a beggar for love who knocks helplessly at strangers' door. To receive at least small measure, she has almost lost her way in search of genuine and selfless love. Devices. The poem My Grandmother's House by Kamala Devas uses several poetic devices, including simile, metaphor, imagery, and reverse simile, a figure of speech that compares two things using the words like, as, or than. For example, lie behind my bedroom door like a brooding dog. Metaphor, a figure of speech that describes something in a way that isn't literally true but helps explain an idea or make a comparison. For example, to peer through blind eyes of windows, imagery A literary device used this wide, vivid description to appeal to a reader's senses to create an image or idea. For example, the image of snakes moving among the books. Reverse, a style of writing that doesn't use a rhyme scheme. In my grandmother's house, the lack of rhyme scheme keeps the poem feeling natural and conversational. Themes of the poem. The poem My Grandmother's House by Kamala Das explores themes of love, loss, and longing. The poem is a conventional piece that describes the speaker's relationship with her grandmother and the pain of losing her. Love and loss. The poem is about the speaker's grief over the loss of her grandmother who provided her with unconditional love. The speaker's desire to return to her grandmother's house is a wish to revisit the love and security of her childhood. Loneliness. The poem is a portrait of the speaker's loneliness after losing her grandmother. She seeks comfort from strangers, reflecting her desperation for love. Nostalgia. The poem is about the speaker's longing for the time she spent with her grandmother. She wishes she could relive those times. Emotional pain. The poem is about the emotional pain the speaker feels after losing her grandmother. The poem is autobiographical and written to honor the speaker's grandmother. The poem is short with only 16 lines. थैंक यू। आई होप आज की वीडियो आपको पसंद है। कैसी लगी हमें कमेंट करके बताएं और हमें ये भी कमेंट करके बताएं कि आप आने वाले वीडियोस किस टॉपिक पर देखना चाहते हैं। और अगर वीडियो अच्छी लगी तो लाइक शेयर एंड सब्सक्राइब टू माई चैनल। मिलते हैं कल एक और इन्फॉर्मेटिव वीडियो के साथ शाम 4 बजे। थैंक यू।